WWE has officially published the Bray Wyatt documentary. Bray Wyatt Becoming Immortal is available on Peacock, and this was a really tough watch from an emotional standpoint, which I don't think surprises anyone if you haven't had a chance to see it. But this is one where I sat down. I'm like, all right, I'm probably gonna have to watch this in different segments, right? Like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to watch this whole thing all the way through. I'm like, I'll watch 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, but as I started watching, I knew that wasn't going to happen because you're just hooked into the story that they're telling about the late Windham Rotunda and his entire life and everything, kind of how it started, how it ended. It is quite the roller coaster of emotions when you watch this thing, and I thought it was just so well done. And look, there's no way I'm going to be able to recap every little kind of segment of everything. I would say this, watch it. Like, just watch the thing. I can't recommend it enough because they just did such a tremendous job, I think, of capturing who Windham Rotunda was. And that's what's always important, especially when you're doing like a documentary on a character, right? Like, you're doing it on a character that people know in professional wrestling, Bray Wyatt. Yeah, you're doing a documentary. We get it. That's who it's about. But if your ability to sort of give us the full glimpse into this person as a human being, I think is what always stands out to me and why some of these stick out more than others. And I just thought they did just incredible work doing that here. And like I said, I'm probably going to bounce all over the place here talking about this because, obviously the timeline is what it is. You have someone who was born into, a wrestling family, right? And, obviously, Mike Rotunda, Barry Windham, Kendall Windham, Blackjack Mulligan, all these people and sort of the lineage there with Windham Rotunda, and but to see kind of the trajectory where he starts off, going into football. Everybody thinks he thinks he wants to play for the Oakland Raiders. That was his dream, and he gets into football, plays college football, realizes that's not going to be in the cards to go play in the pros. Decides to get into wrestling because he sees his brother there, Bo Dallas, which is Taylor Rotunda. I may alternate calling him Bo and Taylor. Just keep in mind, we're going to kind of give you the list here because it's just out of habit, right? But I think when you kind of hear what led him into wrestling and how much they enjoyed kind of teaming up with each other early on in those FCW days and all that, and then to see just the transformation of someone who goes from Husky Harris in 2010, which is a completely awful gimmick, which we all know who gave him that. You go from that to 4 years later, he's wrestling John Cena at WrestleMania and has become one of the biggest stars on the roster at that point because of just the uniqueness that they've built with the Bray Wyatt character and the family, all of this. It is remarkable because you think about how tough that can be to go from a gimmick that's going nowhere in wrestling, but then to go into a new thing, completely coming up with your own sort of new character that just completely takes off and starts to resonate with fans. And that was really what it was all about, was you had a character that found a way to connect with fans. And Sami Zayn said that, I think he pointed out in the documentaries that that's the most important thing. Whether you do it through matches, whether you do it through promos, it's how do you connect with the audience? And that's not something that it's easy to do for a lot of people in wrestling because you can't just always do it with one thing or the other. Sometimes you have to find a way to do it, with both. And he was someone who I think you just look at either the way he delivered his promos, the character itself, how committed he was to it. And that was the main theme here, was just how committed he was to every idea and every character that he wanted to bring out of him. And I thought that was really the common theme here, which is you're talking about someone who creatively was on another level, and it's like taking a risk to be able to do that, to put all these ideas out in the world. I mean, that's what I feel like there's a part of me, and we always try to find ways to compare, right? How do we get invested? How do we resonate with certain characters? Like for me, I'm like someone who I like to be creative. I feel like I've always been like that artistic type person, but it's thinking, man, I don't know. Like, do I really want to take that chance to put this idea out into the world, this idea out into the world? I mean, it's like anything, like even just making videos, right? There's always that wonder and that nervousness where you're like, oh, I don't know how people are going to take this. I don't know what people are going to think. But I think they did such a tremendous job pointing out that This was someone who did not hesitate to take risks and someone who did not hesitate to put his art out into the world. Even if there were people who didn't understand it, even if there were people who wouldn't accept it, he was not afraid to push the boundaries, take risks, and ultimately be brave about, hey, I've got these ideas, they've got to come out of me, and this is how I want to try to, put them into the world and leave a legacy with all these different ideas and all these different characters or all this other stuff that can resonate with people that they're going to remember. And I thought that was a really important aspect of this. And again, if we take anything away from it, there's plenty you can take away from this documentary, but there's one thing in particular, and I think it is just the idea of embracing the fact that, hey, if you want to put something out there, artistically, creatively, all these ideas are flowing through you. I think there's a lot of people that can resonate with that. Like they can really understand what it's like to be in that position where sometimes these ideas just completely can overwhelm you. Like the only way to feel better is just to put them out there, to get them out there. And I thought that was a great takeaway from this was someone who, despite all the nerves, and they really go into just the nervousness of Bray Wyatt as he's making that return, getting ready for it at Extreme Rules, on the comeback after he gets released and all that. I just thought that was really awesome to see someone who is battling, the obsession of the ideas and the characters and all of this, but he has those nerves, but it's like he did it anyway. He kept putting his art out into the world. He kept finding ways to put it out there, even within a box of professional wrestling, which not everything's always going to click. And I think Triple H was talking about that. You had someone who had so many ideas, and that sometimes did not make it easy in the creative process to collaborate with other people, because this was someone in Bray Wyatt, Windham Rotunda, who knew what he wanted. He knew what he wanted out of these characters. He knew every little tiny detail and how he wanted to implement it. But that's not always going to be something that everyone else understands. And I thought just the ability to kind of tell this story and really push all these creative things. And as I'm looking at my notes here, I probably have more notes for this documentary than I've ever had for any documentary I've ever put together or I've ever talked about here on the channel in a video. It's just, there's so much stuff that I think you can look at this. And that is my first thing, just to quickly say, you have to watch this thing, because I thought this was one of the best ones WWE has done. The Undertaker narrated it. You get all the fans, the footage from like him interacting with fans. Like I think that's something too. I always say like the footage that WWE has is on another level. Their ability to pull different pieces of, a person's career. And I think it's not just the in-ring stuff, right? It's all the stuff outside the ring where he's meeting fans, seeing how fans responded to the character, and all this stuff. Like that's just something you get that tells the full story, like that gives you kind of the full picture of everything with this guy. And I know, again, I'm going to jump around. Like there's no way I'm going to be able to tell you every little tiny detail of this entire thing. But I think the overarching theme here is that I felt like this was one where you got really into the mind of Bray Wyatt. And this is where, again, they can pull from the footage. They can pull from a lot of audio stuff that they had from him talking like that. They put this up on the screen multiple times, talking about how this is like footage you're seeing for the first time. Like these were in the WWE archives. It's never been seen before. So I think that's one of the hooks too. If you want to watch this, you're going to see stuff you cannot find anywhere else. This is the first time they've released this footage or the audio stuff, some of it. So I think that's very important to keep in mind. If you're on the fence about this, I would say 100% watch it, because you cannot find some of the stuff that's in here anywhere else. And I thought that made for, again, a very tough watch at times, because, not just from the wrestling standpoint of seeing all the different things. And again, I feel like the wrestling stuff is probably the part where you kind of know what to expect here. They go through his entire career, whether, again, starting as Husky Harris, going on to face John Cena, basically 4 years later, and then just the evolution of the Wyatt family on the main roster, and then, getting to The Fiend and all the different, creative efforts that went into that with Jason Baker, who was a real main focus of this, talking about someone who really just worked hand in hand with Bray Wyatt on the creative stuff that they did. And, of course, then eventually the WWE release that came after that WrestleMania, and then the comeback at Extreme Rules. And so you kind of, the trajectory here is pretty, predictable in terms of looking at the in-ring stuff, but you're going to get a lot of interesting information along the way that you had no idea probably that was there because, again, this is sort of the unique aspect of WWE having all this old stuff in the footage, in the archives, and everything that they have that can tell this story in a complete way. But it's outside the ring. It is the stuff that will really, it will get you. I don't know how else to say it because the whole other theme outside of just the fact that we're talking about someone who creatively is probably unlike anybody we've seen before in WWE. It is just the relationship he had with his family and his kids. And this was the part where, I talked about going in. I'm like, I feel like I'm going to have to watch this in segments because it's really going to be hard to watch this in just one fell swoop here, right? But it's the relationship he had, with his family, of course. Like we said, his dad, Mike, of course, his mom, who was a big part of this as well. But it's really that dynamic with his brother. We mentioned Bo Dallas / Taylor Rotunda and his sister, and them telling stories about how much they looked up to him. Specifically Taylor Rotunda. Just talking about how kind of the best times of his life were with his brother, whether it was them teaming together as a tag team, whether it was him coming to see him after he got injured for, I think it was a state wrestling tournament or something, and he went in, wanted to, kind of make his brother proud and all this, and he shows back up at the home afterwards because he knew he wasn't going to be able to win the tournament because he got injured, and he's waiting. Wyndham's waiting on him and just gives him a big hug, and he feels like he's let him down and all this, but he says, none of that shit matters. And again, just stuff like that. I mean, just the connection he had, and his sister's about a time where in high school, she's coming out for something for homecoming, and I think she, had to walk out on the field or something, and she's like, she felt very self-conscious of her weight and all that, and she didn't have anyone to walk her down the aisle or down the field, however they did it, and so he drives and shows up and does it for her, and those kind of things. You get kind of the photos and everything of that. But I mean, someone who just, loved his family. And I think that was such a big part of this, is just sort of the connection that they all had as brothers and sister, right? Like they just had that kind of connection. And, and then, of course, the part that I knew would be the one where I just didn't really know what to expect, because I'm thinking, it's going to be there. You just don't know how exactly, they're going to tell the story, because we didn't know the full story other than just what had came out about Wyndham's passing. But, when JoJo comes into this, things just really start to, again, get pretty tough watching it, because you kind of hear her talk about everything that happened that day, August 24th, 2023. And, just to hear her retell the story, and not just her, of course, the entire family, and how everyone kind of reacted to what happened that day. And, it's a guy who just went to take a nap and had sort of the lingering effects of COVID. And, they had found something in terms of, an issue with his heart and all this. And, so like the doctors were monitoring things and all that. And then he comes in that day. And, I think JoJo had said, just sort of his normal self, excited. The kids were there, and he was excited to see the kids and all this, and basically just said he was going to go take a nap. And alarm went off and wasn't getting up, and she found him and was trying to get him to wake up. They rushed him to the hospital. And then, we all know what happened from there. But yeah, that was just because you see everyone in this, as his career is going along, what they talk about specifically, and you even have his ex-wife in here as well. She was a big part of this, and just sort of how every time he had a child, how it would sort of change his perspective, and how it would sort of change his mindset, his motivation, and that would kind of, push him to come up with the next big idea, right? The next thing that's going to keep pushing forward. And I think that was always something you could see here, is that, his daughters would push him in terms of, okay, I have a daughter now. That makes me more motivated to do this next thing and to come up with this next idea that's going to keep me, right there, right? As someone who has a job and someone who is able to keep pushing forward creatively. And, ultimately he had a son too. And they were talking about how happy he was. He had a son. He's like, I thought I could just have daughters. And so, those are the toughest parts. And like I said, we could certainly spend an hour going through just the timeline of his career, and everything they went into here, all the big matches, all the big moments that he had. But those are things that I think most people probably, if you follow Bray Wyatt's career, you already know that kind of stuff. But what you're also going to get here is stuff that you did not know. And you're going to see the friendships that he built with, again, someone like Jason Baker, who was there with him the entire way, building these different, kind of characters with the Fiend and all of that. And you're also, going to see all of the comments from the people that we knew really valued someone like Bray Wyatt and his creativity and his enthusiasm for what he did in WWE. I mean, there's so many people that are part of this, whether it's, again, John Cena, Sami Zayn, Seth Rollins, Becky Lynch, like keep going down and down the line here. There are so many people who just kind of weigh in on what it was like to be around him and really just, again, the creative genius that was inside and wanting to get all these ideas out there into the world. And just how brave it was for him to do that inside of this environment where, sometimes we said for the longest time WWE was just sort of an environment where it was the same thing over and over and over again. But this guy pushed the boundaries. And again, it's because he had all these ideas. He had all these things he had to get out there. And so I think that was the thing to me. Again, more than just the timeline of what they do. And this is where the strength of WWE, as we said, is in the footage. It's in what you haven't seen before, really helping with the timeline. And really, I thought going into the John Cena match, at WrestleMania, the second time around, just looking back at that match and how unique it was. And I know not everyone, maybe thought it was the best thing, but I just think it's like the ultimate sort of artist's canvas, like just to see all the things that went into that. And you do see all the behind the scenes stuff of how they made that. And that was the thing, a lot of behind the scenes stuff here that we've never seen before. But really, I think the thing you're going to get coming out of this is not just kind of the creative part of it, but really just all the connections that this guy was able to make. And I can't remember who said it. I think it was his sister who said there was just something about Bray Wyatt that, I'm trying to find it in my notes, but it was something about where people just felt better whenever Bray Wyatt was on their screen. So like after the thing where he gets released and all that, they wind up coming up with this different thing, right? They come up with the QR codes and all this other stuff, very creative to make his comeback. And I think, it was his sister who said there was something about him that just made people feel better and that they missed seeing him on TV. And I thought that was a very interesting comment because I think she's right. Like there was something just about having Bray Wyatt on the screen that you could never look away, but like she mentions it was like a comforting thing, and I'm not sure why. And maybe some people can weigh in on that. But I thought that was one of the more interesting comments of this was that it was just a character that somehow drew you in, and it didn't matter what iteration it was, right? He always found ways just to draw you in and keep you invested. And I thought that was the most interesting thing. And they had Rob Fee too, someone who's kind of the director of creative development in WWE. And they had him as someone who really, played such a big role too in this. Because if you've read stuff about Rob Fee before, he has played such a big part. Again, as the director of the creative or the character development in WWE now. So, I think that is there's a lot of stuff here. And like I said, I know I can ramble and go all over the place with this, but I'd much rather you just watch it because I think that you will not regret the 2 hours that you spend watching this because, it was just. I thought it was so well done. And I know it's easy sometimes when we're reviewing things just to pick apart things here and say, well, they could have done this, they could have done that. Nah, not on this. I think it was just what it needed to be, and it gave you quite a tribute to Bray Wyatt. And they also have, the footage from the service that they had, and that was another tough thing to watch, to see all the people there and just how many people, just the memories of this guy and what he was able to do. And so, I would highly recommend this, and I couldn't recommend it any higher, to be honest with you. I think if you're into stuff with documentaries, if you like documentaries, you're gonna like this. If you have followed Bray Wyatt's career, you're gonna like this. But as I said, be ready for a difficult watch at times because, especially the stuff when they're just talking about what kind of brother he was, what kind of father he was, and all that. Like it really can pull at you. But yeah, nonetheless, it is worth your time. And there is a little Easter egg at the end of this. As we know, Triple H loves the Easter eggs, and so did Bray Wyatt, as we learned throughout this documentary. We also learned, quickly, we also learned kind of what was behind the Firefly Funhouse and all the different characters that he brought in there. We learned what some of them meant. Now, we already knew what a few of them meant, but he went into what each character in the Firefly Funhouse, I don't know why I can't say that, what each character represented to him. And so I thought that was a very interesting tidbit too. You won't get anywhere else. But they did drop an Easter egg at the end, maybe hinting at the legacy living on for Bray Wyatt. And what could that mean? You'll have to watch all the way through the credits, as always. It wouldn't be a Triple H thing, right? It wouldn't be a Triple H documentary here in this WWE without you having to watch all the way to the end. So I would definitely recommend that. Don't turn it off when the credits hit. So there you go. There's some quick thoughts. Like I said, this was not as probably structured as I would have wanted it. So I have probably pages upon pages of notes that I'm looking at right here on the screen. And there's no way I was going to be able to get to all of them, because if I did, this thing would have been probably just as long as the documentary. But I did want to share some of my thoughts on this. And again, I think this is one that you probably have to watch for yourself to understand just how tremendous it is in paying respects to the late Windham Rotunda. So if you watched it, let me know what you think in the comments, and let me know what you thought of the documentary there. And yeah, we will, of course, have a lot more coverage this week leading up to WrestleMania 40. Check out all the other videos on the channel. Hit that subscribe button. Always enjoy talking wrestling with you guys. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the documentary Bray Wyatt Becoming Immortal.